We're going to start draining the swamp of the crooks that have inhabited it and are defrauding us. We had 8 beneficiaries in one of these substance use disorder centers, 8 who were already dead, but the center was still billing us. Not only did they let the person pass, they kept billing for it. Governor Walz has 60 days, sir, to respond to our letter.
And in my hands, I have articles of impeachment against Attorney General Keith Ellison.
Representative Mike Weiner. Impeachment articles for the fraudster in chief, Tim Walz.
I need you guys to understand something. Tim Walz, former VP candidate, the governor of Minnesota, is not having a good week. Not a good month, not a good year. The federal government just froze $250 million from his state. They filed articles of impeachment against him and his AG, and now we're about to watch Dr. Oz lay out exactly how bad it got. But before we continue to go in, I noticed that many of you who are watching this channel and watch these videos are not subscribed. This is your reminder. If you like these videos, you want these videos to continue, hit the like and subscribe button. Really appreciate it. Let's get into it.
There's a fraud scheme in Minnesota where criminals, soon to be criminals, pay moms $1,000 roughly in order to enroll their children as being autistic, falsely, dishonestly claiming their children are autistic. They then bill Medicaid, this has already happened, millions of dollars for services that were never rendered, never delivered by a qualified staff member. These schemes disproportionately involve immigrant communities. They're insulated, they're able to organize efforts, and sometimes they don't understand what's going on. And it ultimately diverts resources away from kids who truly have autism. Because if every kid in the neighborhood has autism, then nobody has autism in terms of how you can manage them. There was one behavioral, and by the way, these kids, they carry that diagnosis of autism the rest of their lives. Their mom made a bad decision, the kid pays the price for the rest of their life. There's one behavioral health organization, Mr. Vice President in Minnesota, they received $11.5 million in Medicaid payments, but the top biller submitted 450 days where they claimed they were working more than 24 hours a day.
So you're going to hear a lot of what we already discussed, but it's still baffling when you hear it. Did he say someone billed 450 days claiming that they worked more than 24 hours a day in a single day? In 1 year, there are about 365 days. This person submitted 450 of them and nobody caught it. Not the state, not the governor's office, nobody. On what planet this person was in? I don't think it was in Earth, because Earth takes, 365 days for the Earth to spin around the sun. Maybe it was in Jupiter or Saturn or something. And what really bothers me is the autism part of all this. They are paying mothers $1,000 to falsely diagnose their child as autistic so they can build Medicaid for services that were never delivered. And that child now carries that label for the rest of their life. Their mom made a decision, possibly out of desperation, possibly out of greed, and that kid has to walk into every school, every job, every doctor's office with that label on them forever. And at the same time, kids who actually need autism therapy don't get it because all the tax dollars are going to the fraudsters. Now, I need you to hold that thought while I show you this graph right here. This is the Minnesota Department of Human Services' own data on autism program repayments.
Less than $2 million. By 2019, word got out that money was available. And then when COVID hit, the money really started moving until we see in 2024 almost $350 million paid out for autism treatment. Quite an increase in cases.
Just look at it. 2017, $1 million. 2018, $6 million. By 2021, it's up to $83 million. In 2024, $343 million. That is a 300% increase in 7 years. In 7 years, did the population of autism children just blow up in Minnesota? Tim Walz has been governor since 2019. Every single year on this chart after he took office, the number went up. Not a little bit up, exponentially up. And that's why, as of yesterday, the Minnesota Freedom Caucus filed articles of impeachment against him.
Hey folks, Representative Drew Roach here. Here with my other colleagues from the Minnesota Freedom Caucus, here to do the work for the people.
Representative Ben Davis, folks, and in my hands I have articles of impeachment against Attorney General Keith Ellison. As I'm sure you're aware, he had the Feeding Our Future fraudsters in his office doing an alleged quid pro quo. He's not fit for office.
Representative Mike Weiner. Impeachment articles for the fraudster in chief, Tim Walz, holding politicians accountable, holding him accountable for the massive amount of fraud in the state of Minnesota, estimated $9 billion taxpayers' money that is being wasted. Ready to drop this.
Article 1 says that he knowingly concealed or permitted the concealment of widespread fraud despite repeated warnings and audits. That graph is the warning. That graph is the audit.
So CMS is done paying and chasing. We don't think jail sentences are the right way out. These criminals flee the country. Many are foreign nationals. Instead, we're launching the largest action against fraud that we've ever taken. The money's not going to ever leave the building again. We're going to start draining the swamp of the crooks that have inhabited it and are defrauding us. There are 3 bold actions. The first, and for many of you maybe the most important, is we're going to, for the first time, take a massive action to defer funds to a state. Let's start with this Medicaid program in Minnesota, which serves pregnant women. Medicaid takes care of our children. 53% of kids are born into poverty. They're supported through Medicaid. Disadvantaged seniors, individuals with disabilities. It's unponderable that you would take advantage of these precious programs. Yet they're putting it at risk, all of it, by stealing the money. So it's our duty to preserve Medicaid, and what we're going to do is identify the scammers, which we have done in Minnesota. We've identified that they've hijacked, in particular, a certain part of the Minnesota Medicaid system. Said differently, and I'll just put the numbers out there, it's going to be $259 million of deferred payments for Medicaid to Minnesota, which we're announcing as I speak to Governor Walz and his team. And that's based on an audit of the last 3 months of 2025. Restated, $250 million is not going to be paid this month to Minnesota for its Medicaid claims.
So let's break down what we just said there. So the federal government, through CMS, which is the agency that runs Medicaid, said out loud on camera, we're not going to send Minnesota $250 million this month. Not as a punishment, as a hold, because the fraud got so out of control, they can't trust the state to spend the money correctly. The money's not going to leave the building again. That's a direct quote. That's the federal government talking about a state that Tim Walz has run for 6 years. Mind you, he was going to run again, but this scandal has been so bad, he was pushed out, and that's why his political career is over. And that's how crazy this whole situation is, even from a political context. Walz isn't just a governor right now. 6 months ago, this man was on a debate stage trying to become the vice president of the United States. He was supposed to be the steady hand, that Midwestern dad, right? The guy who had it together. And the entire time, his state was running a fraud operation that his own Department of Human Services numbers show was doubling, then tripling, then quadrupling every single year. And when investigators and whistleblowers tried to sound the alarm, Article 2 of the impeachment charges said that he interfered with lawful oversight and investigation. He didn't just ignore it. They're alleging he actively got in their way. The thing that gets me is this audit they're referencing only covering 3 months, October, November, and December of 2025. $250 million in red flags in 90 days. Imagine what a full year audit looks like. Actually, we don't even need to imagine. The graph already told us.
Now that's $250 million of money. That's your money. It's your taxpayer money. And these home and community-based services, which again are services that are typically things you would do for your family, but for whatever reason your family's not there to provide them, are very hard to audit. And for that reason, there's been a lot of slippage. The guardrails have not been well maintained, and if you're not serious about the integrity of the program, you'll see these problems happening in your state, which is why Minnesota's not alone, although they're the first to receive this action. These high-growth areas of fraud are difficult to police, so we require the states to take these issues seriously. This $250 million deferment is hopefully going to get on the radar screen for the state of Minnesota and make sure they are responsive to our requests. We did what any honest and patient-focused agency would do. We have notified the state and that we will give them the money, but we're going to hold it and only release it after they propose and act on a comprehensive corrective action plan to solve the problem.
So Dr. Oz just said something that I want to slow down on. He said community-based services are very hard to audit, and that's why there's so much issues. And that's true. These are programs where someone comes to your house, provides care, and leaves. There's no hospital record, there's no camera. It's basically an honor system backed by paperwork. Seems very similar to the PPP situation, right? When you have tight-knit immigrant communities, and I'm not saying that just to be disparaging, but that's literally what he said, who can organize and run these schemes internally, you get a situation where oversight becomes nearly impossible after the fact. The answer is you build the guardrails before the money goes out, not after. That's exactly what Article 4 of Walz's impeachment addresses. It says he failed to faithfully execute laws governing stewardship of public funds and allowed statutory safeguards to be ignored. The guardrails weren't maintained because the leadership didn't maintain them, period. And now Dr. Oz is saying that Minnesota isn't alone. They're just the first to receive this action, which means there are other states in the pipeline. I'm assuming probably Ohio, probably Maine, probably even Washington, because Minnesota is the case study because the numbers are undeniable. You can't just look at this graph, $1 million in 2027, $343 million in 2024, and tell me nobody noticed. Somebody noticed. Multiple people noticed. The question, what did leadership do when they were told? And based on the impeachment articles, the answer is nothing.
If Minnesota fails to clean up the systems, the state will rack up $1 billion of deferred payments this year. Governor Walz has 60 days, sir, to respond to our letter. And if providers and beneficiaries are worried about getting their money and services, please call your governor. These are services the governor has already paid for. We are just not reimbursing the state. And to make it clear, there is a rainy day fund in Minnesota, so we are very confident that people will not be hurt in Minnesota. This is not a problem with the people of Minnesota. It's a problem with the leadership of Minnesota and other states who do not take Medicaid preservation seriously.
And there it is, 60 days. You have 60 days to submit a corrective action plan or the tab goes to $1 billion by the end of the year. $1 billion from a 3-month audit. But notice what Dr. Oz said at the end. This is not a problem with the people of Minnesota. The people of Minnesota, they're victims in this. The kids with legitimate autism diagnosis who can't get services because the system is overwhelmed with fraudulent claims. The seniors and disabled individuals on Medicaid who might face uncertainty while all this gets sorted out. They're the victims. The taxpayers whose money funded all this. Victims. The problem is leadership, and right now the leadership is Tim Walz and Keith Ellison, both of whom, as of yesterday, have articles of impeachment filed against them by the Minnesota Freedom Caucus. And I know some people are going to say this is political, maybe, but the problem is the receipts are not political. That chart from the Minnesota Department of Human Services, that's their data. You can't impeach a chart. What we're watching right now is the federal government essentially saying you had years to handle this. You didn't, and now they're going to handle it for you. And that bill is coming due 60 days, Governor. The clock is running.
The fact that we have so normalized this, and the fact that I guarantee there are going to be voices in the media, there are going to be voices in the state of Minnesota who say, this is hurting children. No. It's hurting fraudsters. The way to protect kids is to go after those fraudsters, which is what we're doing.
We will see what happens with this situation. I'm sure Tim Walz is going to just crash out like usual. But let me know what you guys think about this story in the comments below. Thank you for taking time to watch this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.